All right, so I will apologize in advance. I have a fairly bad cold, so I will probably cough quite a bit and may sneeze a bit, and I'm sweating like crazy, so I apologize for all the bodily fluids. I'll try to limit it to just that few number of bodily fluids. Um, all right. So, I want to say thank you to the organizers, of course. They do an amazing job every year, and I know they have a lot of help. It's not just these two guys, but they just make it seem effortless, and it's always an amazing conference, and you guys are awesome, and I just love being in Spain, love being in Madrid, and actually, if you guys don't mind, can we do a big group hug real quick? We'll wait till after. We'll wait till after. I'm kidding. Don't touch me. All right, show of hands. Football fans here? Any fans of football? So fans of Real Madrid? So of course you know Ronaldo. Well, of course, I saw this first. I was thinking it's great that Brexit is working so great, and that Europe is as messed up as the United States is, or I should say the other way around, that the United States is as messed up as Europe is. This has nothing to do with Groovy or Grails or any great technologies, but I thought it was nice that they honored Ronaldo with an airport with his name and a beautiful bus that looks just like him. And actually, you know what? That's not him. That's what he actually looks like. So, yeah, the first one I don't know where I got that first one. So, all right. So as you can tell from my very strange accent, I am from Los Estados Unidos. And so I'm from the New York section of the country. I've been to a lot of the other places. Spent a lot of time in what? It's nice. We call it the flyover states, actually. And of course, you guys have heard the news that we now have an amazing, awesome president. We love the guy. Other people have called him the Great Orange Satan. I think that's overdoing it. I just love the guy, and I think he's just absolutely beautiful. He's his own man. He's not a puppet. In fact, you're the puppet. He's a beautiful, beautiful man. I just can't stop looking at his beautiful face. And he has, as you know, huge hands. Anyone who knows me on Facebook or is friends with me or has seen my Facebook knows that this is actually my current profile picture. And I don't know what it is about it that struck me as being just the perfect image to display myself to the world. But I just love that. He's just a wonderful, wonderful man. So no, of course I'm kidding. He's Satan himself, and that's awful. And we shouldn't be talking about that anyway. Let's talk about something that actually matters to us. So, sorry. So, metaprogramming my eyes. So I'm going to do a little bit of odd stuff before I actually talk about anything real. So this is a photograph of me about 3 weeks ago. So I had eye surgery, and it was elective eye surgery. I chose to make them do this to me. I was reading online, I saw an article about a treatment for something called presbyopia. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's actually something that will affect every person in this room who manages to live past the age of 45 or 50. So if you are lucky, like I am, to have normal vision, so I'm not farsighted, I'm not nearsighted, I've never had to wear glasses. But as you get older, you start needing reading glasses, right? So if you already have glasses, then you need bifocals or progressive lenses. And if you're like me and you've never worn glasses, then you need reading glasses for near reading, and it's very frustrating. And it got worse every year, and it's very annoying. And we all spend a lot of time in front of a computer, so that puts even more stress on the eyes. So when I heard that there was a treatment for this, I thought it was very exciting. And it wasn't super expensive. It was around 4,000 euros. And it's a very quick procedure. It takes about 10 minutes. It's a very freaky procedure, though. So what they actually do is they numb the eye, and they do your non-dominant eye. So you know how you're right-handed or left-handed, and we also have a dominant eye and a non-dominant eye, and it's not necessarily the same as your right-handedness. But my dominant eye is my right eye. So they did the procedure just in one eye. And so they actually cut the flap off the cornea, lift it up, and they insert a tiny little water-filled lens into your eye, and then put the flap back on. And then after a few weeks or a few months, your vision starts becoming normal again, and you can suddenly see up close, and you can see far away. It's amazing. And the reason I'm calling it metaprogramming my eyes is that you're totally tricking your brain, and it's a really fascinating thing. Because if you know about how vision works, right? So we have light that comes in to our eyes, and it hits the eyeball, and then hits the back of the retina. But it actually gets flipped upside down, right? So our brain switches it back again. And we also get two different images. They're slightly different. So that's how we get depth perception. That's how we get a sense of depth. So the amazing thing about this is that even though you only treat one eye, and even though you only do this one little thing, at first your vision gets a little bit worse, but eventually it gets very good. And it's been 3 weeks now, and it's amazing. My eyes are actually now, my brain has tricked itself into thinking that everything's normal. So when I was a kid, you guys probably don't remember this at all, or you've probably never seen it, but there was a show in the US called $6 Million Man. And it was about an astronaut who had been in a horrible accident, and he was nearly dead. And he was such an important guy. He was very, highly skilled and very important. So they spent $6 million, which, in the 70s was a lot of money, to give him 2 bionic legs and a bionic arm and a bionic eye. So he's basically a cyborg, and he fought crime. And it was a great show. I had the action figures, and I used to love that show. And so I've always, because of that and other things, I've always been fascinated with the idea of being a cyborg, the brain-computer interface kind of stuff that we're now talking about. So fascinating stuff. So I was very, very excited about getting this procedure done. Turns out it's a very uncomfortable experience. And unfortunately, I forgot to ask them to take a photo of me during the actual procedure. So this is not me. This is some other poor sucker. But this is exactly what I felt like. And that. And that's what it really felt like. And it was a long, long, long 10 minutes. And I'm so glad when it's finally over. But it's amazing that your brain does this thing. We can trick our brains into doing it. And it's basically kind of like the way that metaprogramming works, right? Metaprogramming looks amazing. But when you actually start digging into the implementation of how Groovy works and how metaprogramming works, we realize that it looks like magic, but someone just had to do an awful lot of work under the hood to pretend that something magical is happening. And that's basically what's happening here. We're doing all this work and tricking our brains into thinking that we're adding all these methods to this interface. We're adding near vision to the presbyopic interface and everything. So pretty amazing stuff. So that was a very cool experience. So another thing that I've been doing lately is this thing called a space bucket. And I've never used Raspberry Pi before, but so I've been growing a certain type of plant in this bucket, and this is something I built out of myself. So I went to the hardware store and I bought these 20-liter buckets, these 5-gallon buckets. And you actually create, it's almost like a terrarium. So you create this environment. So you have very high intensity lights, and you have a PC fan blowing air intake, and then you have another fan on the output pulling hot air out of the top. And what I saw as a really fascinating opportunity here was to do some fun growing some plants, but also have monitoring. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool to have a small computer? The Raspberry Pi costs $30, and it's very easy to get humidity sensors and temperature sensors and moisture sensors and a camera, all that stuff. So I bought a Raspberry Pi and configured it and set it all up, and a lot of the stuff that I did was Python because it's the really preferred language there. But of course, as quickly as I could get away from Python, I did, and I'm actually running a Grails app on my Raspberry Pi. Unfortunately, I wanted to do a demo of this, but I forgot that I had to bring this thing to a friend's house so he could water my plants while I was gone. And I set up my firewall, so that I had open port, but I forgot that I didn't do that for his firewall, so I can't actually show you any live photos or anything. But here's some photos that I actually took. I made some time-lapse photos. And it has just been so much fun. So you can see the sensors down here. And so the camera's mounted above that, and there's a row of lights and stuff. And so I got this little Grails app, and it's running on Raspberry Pi. And so I'm capturing every minute. I'm capturing the temperature and the humidity and the soil moisture. And then every hour I take a photograph. I keep that all in a database, and then so right now all I have is CRUD pages. So so that was temperature, humidity, moisture. I need to add. I don't just use water. You use nutrients. Plant nutrients. So there are different mixes that you use for different parts of the grow period. So I'm keeping track of all that stuff, and there's a section where I can. So I keep track of when I water. So it's every 3 days I water this stuff. And then there's a way I can take notes and stuff. And so the one thing I haven't really done yet is set up graphing. So that's my next step when I get back, is setting up some ad hoc and real-time graphs, so I can actually see, and maybe some alarms and stuff. So this has been an amazingly fun thing, because working in that really confined space is a lot of fun. Because the Raspberry Pi is very powerful, but it's still it's a gigahertz processor, and it's got a very limited amount of memory. But it's running Grails on this tiny little thing has been quite a cool thing. So I'm able to view individual photos and stuff. And then a couple weeks ago, this guy Todd Sharp, and I haven't actually read this list yet. This series, but he just started doing a blog post series. He's at part 4 now, on running Grails on Raspberry Pi, and I thought that was really fascinating that this guy's doing the same thing that I was. So I've got these bookmarked, and I got to check those out when I get back. So, as you guys probably know, I used to work for Pivotal. I used to be somebody, and now I'm not. And as you can tell, I loved it there. I don't know why I left, but so you're all familiar now with the fact that they let everybody go, and so Groovy went to Apache, and that's been over a year now. So things have. It took a while to kind of switch over the infrastructure, but things are going really well now. A lot more structure and a lot more process. But all in all, that's been a really fantastic thing. And OCI rode in on a very large white horse and hired Graham and Jeff, and then also hired 15 people now. I mean, it's crazy. And it's awesome. And so both Groovy and Grails have really strong features. And to be honest, for a while, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I figured Groovy as a language was probably going to last, but I was fairly pessimistic about the future of Grails. But I've been pleasantly surprised that Grails is doing better than ever, and the amount of stuff that's happened in the last, it's you guys have seen what I've seen. It's just super impressive stuff. The Gorm 6.1 stuff is amazing. The data services and all that. So I'm not really going to talk about that because Graham's doing a keynote tomorrow, and he's much better suited to talk about that sort of stuff. But thank you to OCI for being awesome. So I think it's been long enough that I can tell this little story. So when Pivotal was formed, it was formed from VMware and EMC, right? So EMC owned most of VMware. So they took a big chunk of EMC and a big chunk of VMware and merged them together. But they also threw away a bunch of really amazing people and some really strong products. So there was a Microsoft Exchange clone called Zimbra. There was a big team down in Australia that was working on a sort of a competitor to Cloud Foundry. And they didn't really want to support 2 of those, so they let all those folks go. And so they really cut loose a lot of really good products and great people. And so luckily we were still there. So we had an intranet, and they had some videos. So Paul Moritz, who was the CEO at the time, was having these sort of, I think it was like every week or so, he'd have a little meeting, and it was kind of a round table, and he would kind of talk about, what is the state of the transition from VMware and EMC to this new Pivotal thing. And there was actually this 2-stage process that it took. And so he's talking, they sent us this thing saying, hey, this new video, check it out. So I remember it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was watching this video, and I wasn't paying a lot of attention because I was kind of multitasking. I was coding and watching this video. And he's talking about how it was really unfortunate that we had to let all these good products and good people go. So he's talking about, Zimbra and this, and of course Groovy and Grails and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, wait, what? Of course Groovy and Grails. What? Have I been fired? Did no one tell me that I've been fired? So Graham, I live in the U.S. So Graham is 6 hours away, 6 time zones away. So it was around 9 o'clock his time, and quite often, he's really good about, not, being a family guy. So he's not he doesn't work 29 hours a day like I tend to do, which is awesome. I wish I was more like that. So I wasn't sure that we were going to be able to get a hold of him, but we did. And he contacted his boss, Randy, who was in California. So it was noon in California, so plenty of time for him to do that. And about an hour later, we had everything resolved. He was like, nope, it's a false alarm, no big deal. We'll figure it out. So it turned out what actually happened is they basically made a list of who's going to make it and who's got to go. And we were below the line. So, but then someone must have, for whatever reason, decided to put us above the line, but nobody told Paul. Nobody told the CEO. So he has this meeting, and he's listing all this stuff, and he thinks that we're gone. And he's like, of course, Groovy and Grails. And so when they released that video to the public, they edited that little bit out. So you'll never actually hear that phrase in that video if you end up finding it. But it was a very strange afternoon, I'll tell you that. And then, of course, it wasn't that long after that, a year and a half or so later, that, or 2 years later, that they did actually get rid of Groovy and Grails. So, so I think we are very lucky that we have these amazing conferences. So this is kind of an order of their founding. So of course GreatConf wasn't the first Grails conference, but it's the oldest one that's still running. And then so GreatConf EU is amazing. I know a lot of you guys have been there, and I highly recommend it. The organizers there are amazing. Copenhagen is great. It's expensive place to get to and an expensive place to be, but it's pretty awesome. GreatConf US is similarly awesome. It's Minneapolis is very nice in the summertime anyway. I don't think I'd want to be there in the winter. But same thing, we're very lucky that all these conferences have amazing organizers and great people and enthusiastic crowds. And of course, not long after the first GreatConf US, Greach came around, and now it's been there. Now it's the sixth year of Greach, so that's very cool. Fairly recently, GreatConf has expanded up to India. And I've been honored to have been able to go there twice now. So I was there last year and again this year. And that's another one. I mean, India is a big deal. It's a huge trip. I mean, it's expensive, and it's very far away, and very different from pretty much anywhere you've ever been. But it's just an absolutely amazing experience. And so I highly recommend that. And then the Spring One 2GX, which for years and years and years has always been the two parts, right? So there's the Spring tracks and then the Grails and Groovy tracks, and what you bought a ticket for both, and you can go to whatever ones you wanted, and that was awesome. But then of course after they jettisoned Groovy and Grails, they decided to they did one more 2GX I think after that, but then they decided to fork them. So now we've got G3 Summit, which is great. I didn't go to the one this year, but I'm hopefully going to be going to the ones in the future. That was down in Florida. So I think we're just absolutely blessed to have these amazing conferences. And of course, a honorable mention to the Groovy and Grail Sexchange. I'm sorry, that was a weird Freudian slip. I mean Grails Exchange in London. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough interest, I guess. And so 2015 was the last time they did that. But that was always a really cool thing, and London's a really cool city. So I recently, in the last year or so, I've been subscribed to the Groovy and user and dev mailing lists. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about is stuff that I absolutely do not claim to be an expert in. But I kind of wanted to give sort of because Graham is going to do the Grail stuff, so I was thinking I would focus more on the Groovy side. So talking a bit about what is going on in Groovy right now and what is the future, because it's some really, really amazing stuff happening. So one kind of neat thing is that there are now Docker images for Groovy, and that's quasi-officially supported. So it's officially supported on the Docker side, and it's not really officially supported on the Apache side, but they're okay with it. So that's pretty awesome. Recently, there's been a couple new committers. So of course Sergey's here and did from what I'm told, a great workshop on the new macro feature that's been recently added. And Daniel Sun, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but this guy is a rock star. Well, both these guys are rock stars, but Daniel has been doing this new Parrot Parser, which is a Antler-based complete reworking of the Groovy parser, and so performance and streamlining and adding a lot of Java 8 features. So really, really amazing stuff. So congratulations to those guys for contributing some really, really cool stuff. So just this week, after 2 years of waiting, they merged in the macro methods stuff into 2.5, and you can now actually, they did a release, an alpha release. So I'm pretty sure it's not available through SDK Man, but you can just download it and set it up yourself, do it manually. So one of the unfortunate things about the pivotal cutting loose the Groovy team has been that Not as many people are available to work part-time or even full-time, full-time or even part-time on Groovy. There are way fewer people who are being paid to work on Groovy. So I was looking at the dates and thinking that I was kind of wondering, what was the sort of the pace of the Groovy releases, and they were fairly steady. I mean, it's 200, 300 days or so, but it's been 2 years since 2.4.0 to get a 2.5 release. Over 2 years, 799 days. And 2.5, of course, is alpha quality, so who knows how long it'll take for it to be really stable. So it's kind of unfortunate that Groovy has slowed down quite a bit, but it's still super high quality and a lot of momentum there. Paul King was recently hired at OCI, so he's being paid to work on Groovy. Jochen is working at Canoe, and I believe he's working half-time on Groovy. And the other folks are doing what they can. I know that Cedric is busy at Gradle, but we've got these great external contributors who are adding a lot of stuff, and they've, in addition to those two, there are more new committers, so there's a lot going on there. So here's, if you wanted to play with this stuff, I did this myself just yesterday, so it's very easy to download this and actually try out macro methods yourself. So the other cool thing is this Parrot Parser. So this is really neat stuff. So there's a bunch of things that are kind of weirdly missing from Groovy. And there's also, we always say that most Groovy code is valid Java code, right? So if you take a Java file, and vice versa. So if you take a .java file and you rename it to .groovy, most of the time it's going to compile and be completely valid. There are a handful of exceptions, though. For example, well, I'll show you a couple of them, but and there's a couple of behaviors that are different if you're using dynamic Groovy versus compile static Groovy, like which method gets called if there's overloaded methods and things. But several of the really cool things that have been done in the Parrot Parser have addressed a lot of those gaps. So currently the parser that's being used in Groovy is based on Antler 2. So the new one's based on Antler 4. There's a bunch of GroovyDoc enhancements. More correctness, a little bit more performance. So we can now do break and continue, labeled break and continue, which isn't a super common thing, but it's nice to have when you kind of want it in our interfaces. This is something that I think they did because they could, but I don't know why you would bother. So one of the nice things about Groovy is that you can leave off the .class and it just works, and I don't even know why we would bother with this, but it's nice that it's there. So it's more, again, it's more like Java if you want it to be. We have all the normal loops in Groovy that you have in Java, except the do while loop. And of course, that's not a big omission. You can fake out a do while easily enough. But it's nice to actually have a real do while loop. The identity operation and the negation of that. So we have that certainly in JavaScript and other languages. So having that in Groovy is kind of cool because you know how equals is a method and it's overloaded. So in order to determine if two things are the same object, you actually use the is method. So now it's nice to have an operator that maps to that. Supporting Lambda expressions from Java 8 has been a big thing that people have really wanted because if you want to be able to do the same coding that you're doing in Java, stream-based processing and the functional interfaces and that sort of stuff, and Lambda expressions. We haven't really been able to do that in Groovy. We have similar stuff. It's easy enough to use closures and SAM methods, automatic conversion of interfaces. But being able to natively support Lambda expressions is huge. It's really important. So currently that's implemented as a closure, and there's a lot of overhead there because there's a lot of weight inside of the closure implementation that isn't needed for a Lambda expression. And it turns out that the actual way that's implemented in Java is with an invoke dynamic call. So that's something that's that they're going to be working on to support. Try with resources. That's something that was added in Java 7 that isn't really something you can do in Groovy yet, but we'll be able to do that with this new Parrot Parser. So here's an example of, those braces look like a closure. So that's why some of these syntaxes are only supported now because the old Groovy parser can't really tell the difference between an array initializer and this sort of a thing. and what looks to be a closure. So now we have that native support. One thing that I'm always frustrated with using for loops is in Java you can initialize as many variables as you want in that first block, and but you can't do that in Groovy. Now you can. Safe indexing. In order to support this in Groovy now, you have to do !.getAt. And, there's a way to support it, but it's nice again to just have it natively in the language itself. And support for default methods. So that's something that isn't currently supported in Groovy, but now is. So one of the fun things that's been cool to watch in the mailing list is, it hasn't happened in a while actually, but for a few weeks there, it was like every so often Daniel would send a new note saying, "Hey, I just added this cool new thing," and 3 days later, "Hey, I just added this cool new thing," and cool, thanks. So it's been really fun to kind of watch all that happen. It's still, this hasn't been merged in. There's no sort of version of Groovy that has this in it. You can of course build it from his fork and use that, but that'll be exciting. So in addition to this stuff, there are potentially breaking changes here, and a lot of this stuff will probably require Java 8, maybe Java 7. So this, and also the support for Java 9 is going to cause some breaking changes in Groovy 3, Groovy 4. So that's another big discussion that's been going on the mailing list. Is Groovy is still using the org codehouse packaging, and Todos doesn't even exist. So it doesn't make sense to continue supporting that except for legacy reasons. So it makes a lot more sense to use org Apache Groovy or something similar to that. So there's been a big discussion on that. So, and it's partly it's for consistency, partly it's because it makes sense, but it's also because you have to make a lot of these changes because using modules and using Jigsaw in Java 9, it's much more strict. For example, you can't have one class. You can't have a class that's in 2 different jar files. They're very strict about that, and Groovy does that in a few cases. So there's a bunch of changes that are going to have to be made. So it's been really interesting seeing that discussion, and it's gotten really intense. Actually, it hasn't gotten heated or anything, but it seemed at the beginning to be a reasonable request, and it seemed like it would be a very quick discussion, but it's turned into this huge discussion. So I definitely recommend. I mean, it's a lot of reading, and it takes a while to keep up with all this stuff, but it's just fascinating to see the inner workings of what the guys are doing, because a lot of times we just use it. We don't really I'm sort of a framework guy, so I like to know how things work under the hood. But for the most part, you've got deadlines and you've got families and you've got lives, and it would be nice to have all the time in the world to know every little detail. But this is kind of a happy medium between spending all your time reading the source and trying to code and implementing this core Groovy type stuff, and just being familiar with what's going on. So I definitely recommend you check that out. So a little while ago, Guillaume set up another version. He's got the Groovy Web Console where you can it's a web page where you can run Groovy code, and you can save snippets and stuff, and it's really nice to be able to just play with that. So we set up a different instance to support the Parrot Parser. So it's running Java 8, uses Indy, and so here's some links that you can go to. So that's a link to the blog post, and then further down that's a link to the actual running instance. And it's really cool because you can just copy paste some examples in there, and it just works. There was one thing that didn't work for me, but everything else just worked, and it was really neat to see this bleeding edge, cool 21st century Groovy actually working. So this is that discussion I was talking about, the Maven coordinates. So and one of the big things that they're worried about, is the Python mess, right? So Python 2 and Python 3 was fairly poorly done, and I'm by no means a Python expert, but it's been interesting to see the frustrations they've had because they've pushed a lot of the work onto the developers to try to make their code work both in Python 2 and Python 3, and so it's nice to have had that huge mess so that we can see that and be warned in advance that we want to avoid that to the extent possible. So it's good that they're having these extended discussions, and hopefully they'll have the smallest number of breaking changes and extra work on our part to actually be able to use the newer versions of Groovy. And of course, there's the we've been talking about this forever, but the new mop is also being discussed. So, and it's kind of funny to me. I think that we're just now on Groovy 2.5, and they're already talking about I don't know if this is going to be Groovy 3 or Groovy 4, and they're really thinking far into the future. So definitely exciting times for the Groovy space. So this is from a few years ago. I was in Copenhagen and did a huge double take because I was like, wow, Gorm in the real world. And I had no idea you guys were so into Gorm. And then recently I was in New York and I saw Gorm again, but this is a really embarrassing typo. And I don't know if I felt bad. I didn't think I should tell them because I didn't know if they knew. And it looks expensive. All right, so that's the end of my time, and I just want to leave you with one small bit of advice. See, I can laugh at that because I don't have kids, so I think that's absolutely hilarious. Thank you. Have an amazing conference. I'm super excited about being here early. I never come to the conferences early, so they tricked me into being here early by making me the keynote speaker. So I'm actually going to be able to see lots of talks, and the content is great. And I'm already frustrated with having 2 talks at the same time that I can't go to. So it's awesome that we had the same folks that have been recording the talks like they've done every year. So once those are out, I'll be spending lots and lots of time on YouTube getting caught up with what all you smart folks are working on and telling us. So have a great conference, and thank you for your time.